Welcome, Dave.
Thank
Really,
you.
really excited to have you here today. Thank you for being our first guest in this series of talks we're calling The Great Pause. So we're in a crazy time right now where everything has changed. We need to rethink what we're doing and what's coming next. Before we deepen a little bit more in that conversation with my colleague Khan, I would like to jump in briefly on how you happen to be here today. So you've been a friend of my father for more than 30 years. When we started the Arena Monterrey back in the 80s, you were running the Reunion Arena, and in some way you helped him as a consultant to build this iconic venue, which is now a large and great arena for the city. And now you're in charge of the American Airlines Center, one of the finest facilities in the world. I'm sure you had great plans for the venue before COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how does it change now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was dramatic. I love the title of your session here, The Great Pause. It's the first time I've heard that, but I think it's very appropriate. It's a great pause, and it was an abrupt pause for us. We were in the midst of our best year ever, performance-wise by our teams. The number of events that we're programming into the American Airlines Center were leading any other year we've ever hosted. We were a top 10 venue in the world in terms of attendance, tickets sold, revenues generated, and that all came to an abrupt stop on March 12th. When we learned that a basketball player of another team had tested positive, and that the NBA was no longer going to host games, the season was postponed. That forced the hand of the NHL, our hockey league, and our hockey team ceased to operate. And then over the course of the next 4 or 5 days, the country went from hosting large-scale acts and venue stadiums. Everything, all mass gatherings were not affected. We really didn't know the extent of COVID and its impact at that point when we shut down. But within 5 days, every other major venue in the country was also shut down, and that included smaller venues and even venues the size of movie theaters and just any place of gathering was put out of business at that time.
Probably you had some plans about 5G transforming fan experiences, capital improvements, concessions. Was there something going on important at that moment for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, we were really in the midst of gearing up for our playoff time frame, which is typically now April, May. We had 2 teams that were geared to make the playoffs, and we had a number of concerts, big high-profile concerts. The Eagles, Elton John, Bon Jovi, a number of big shows that were coming in, and we had to postpone and continue to postpone those events into the future. But you know, we're a venue that has all the latest, greatest technologies. We'll be prepared for whatever challenges that this will create in our restart and whatever that looks like. And that's a whole nother, category that we can discuss.
Okay. Con, you want to continue?
Thanks, Daniela. Hey, Dave, thanks again for being here. Can you, it's been an abrupt stop for everyone, but perhaps no one as much so as someone whose entire business consists of bringing people together for the most part. And you guys with the MBA were on the front lines. What was the decision-making process like as you guys got into the realization that this was going to be something that was a significant change?
Well, we knew that the virus was going to create challenges, but we thought that we could work our way through the challenges. And we'd employed a lot of new techniques in sanitation, every aspect of the way we operate the building was evolving the last 2 weeks before we were shut down. Distancing, food and beverage service changes in terms of eliminating buffets, any kind of touch point in the building, we were eliminating and moving towards a touch-free environment. But when the when a player, NBA player in Oklahoma City tested positive, that forced the hand of the commissioner of the NBA to Adam Silver to cancel all games. And we were the last game played this season. We were on national TV, so it was really the game was secondary to the discussion about how the league had shut down the season and how that would affect sports going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to overstate the impact this must have had on your employees, the teams, the talent that was coming to the arena. Can you talk a little bit about how you've looked at and approached helping mitigate the impact on those parties?
Well, we've been very fortunate in that we've been able to keep our employees on the payroll. Our ownership group, Mark Cuban in particular, as well as our hockey team owner, Tom Gallardi, have committed to not only paying the full-time employees, but the part-time employees through the end of the season. We were in a state of shock. Everyone was in a state of shock. We didn't know when we shut down whether it would be 2 weeks, a month, and now we're looking at it as a 6 to 12 month shutdown. We really are at the mercy of science right now. And in order for a venue that seats 20,000 people in very close proximity, you're literally sharing an armrest with somebody. And to open a venue like this is really going to take a medical breakthrough to open it to the capacity that we used to see, the 20,000 seat capacity. Now, there will be, variations of our manifest, our ticketing manifest to allow for smaller crowds that are distanced. Perhaps 4,000 to 5,000 guests may come in the building that are separated by a number of seats and a number of rows. We'll stagger the entry time for those guests so that they don't come all in at the same time. We'll create one-way concourses and aisleways. We will eliminate points throughout the arena, eliminate a lot of the services that we normally provide in order just to host a few people for games to allow us to start the season up again, likely in the fall. But we are at the mercy of medical breakthroughs before we can put 20,000 guests back in our building at one time.
That's and those things are very hard to predict in terms of time frame.
And indeed, it's a little discouraging. We'll get through it, and this is not the end of sports and concerts, and I think that in some form or fashion we'll have concerts come back probably at the end of the year, November, December, and I see those acts being more younger based group that are willing to tour and their fan bases are younger and less at risk. Acts like a Post Malone or Billie Eilish will be or Elton John is probably going to stay on the sidelines and not be touring until well into next year when there's a vaccine or other advances that make COVID less of a threat. Sports, again, I think that's gonna happen before anything else. We'll have sporting events sooner than concerts.
How have the players and the teams looked at playing in front of a partial crowd or even an empty arena? I know there's been some back and forth on whether or not that would even happen.
I think the initial reaction from players was they didn't like the idea, and I get that as a first instinctive response, that it wouldn't be any fun to play to no crowd. But I think after weeks of this now, the players are very anxious. They're very competitive. They want to finish the season and they want to get paid.
Yeah.
Now, you know, if they can come back, finish the season, have a playoff, crown a champion, and get paid for the rest of the season, then I think they're willing to do that. That seems to be the sentiment. There's going to be a lot of sacrifice to doing that, though. For instance, we're likely to see teams gather in clusters. For instance, in the NBA, you would probably see the league have two sites, two cities where a number of teams show up to play the remainder of their games. They would be quarantined for the entirety of the competition in a hotel without access to friends, family, outside activities. That could go on for close to 2 months that they would be isolated, which for a young athlete in their early 20s, that is not an ideal scenario for them. But I think that as time has gone on, they're coming to realize that there is a demand for the television aspect of the competition, and probably some significant revenue should live sports, major league sports, be able to continue their seasons.
And one of the things I think on everyone's mind, and you alluded to this a little bit, is I mean, we're talking about sports and how those might start to come back even with a quarantine situation for the television rights. But when you think about people coming back in the venue, you mentioned a couple of mitigation techniques like one-way aisles, but are you seeing a refitting of the physical plant in any way to incorporate sensors and things like that?
Yeah, we are. And the industry is focused in three areas to allow us to reopen. One is the screening process for guests. We have to figure out a way to keep ill patrons, guests that may be contagious, keep them out of the arena. A lot of that's going to be honor system. If you don't feel well, and we hope that the societal pressure to to adhere to recommendations of the health community, medical experts, to stay home if you're sick. We're hoping that's sinking in, and people are not going to get out and try and see a game or a concert if they're ill. But we're also investigating technologies, mass screening for abnormal temperature. There are technologies available that will help us do that. There's also some discussion of app-based medical screening where individuals can get medical screened and clearance and have an app that would work almost like a passport to facilities. That's the key. That's the number one thing we have to try and accomplish, is keeping ill patrons out of our venues. Once we do that, then we have to address sanitation of our venues, and that is a very complex science that we're getting into, of how you actually kill viruses, kill germs in an environment like an arena with 1 million square feet of touch points. It's quite a task, but it is something that is achievable, and we'll spend a lot of time studying. And then the third part is crowd dynamics and how guests come and go from the arena, the time they arrive, what their path of travel is. How do we keep everybody from going to the restroom at the same time, going to the concession stands at the same time, passing each other on the aisleways? Seating configurations will be reduced probably to about 20% of capacity to keep a 6-foot radius around our guests and their party. Will allow guest groups up to 4 to sit together, but then we're going to need the 6-foot spacing both on all sides of those guests and where their seating might happen to be. We're looking at seat covers. We're looking at obviously issuing masks to everybody, making masks mandatory. it just goes on, and it's going to be something that is not just specific to American Airlines Center, but it'll be industry standards, just like after 9/11, when we knew we had to make our venues less susceptible to terrorist attacks. We brought in metal detectors. We started screening bags. We brought in canine patrols for bomb sniffing. We brought in extra surveillance and tactical teams. So those were all measures that resulted from the 9/11 attacks. And this will have a similar response from the public assembly facility industry.
The one big difference, of course, though, is you were talking about returning to nearly 100% capacity after 9/11, where if you're going to be constrained by 20 or 30 or 40% capacity initially, the economics of this are far different.
That is the big challenge, and it's more of a challenge for concerts, big touring, live entertainment shows than it is for sports. Sports can retool their revenue streams to depend on the TV revenues and less on the live gate, the live ticket sale. Touring shows don't have that ability. Let's say an act like Elton John goes on the road, he has to hire a crew, buy production, and it's a costly operation that is solely dependent on the ticket sale revenue to make that work. So typically a Elton John show would generate about $3 million in revenue to cover the cost of his tour, which is elaborate. It's minus production. It's extremely expensive to put that tour on the road. So if he's restricted to sell only 20% of the capacity, he can't put that show on the road for $600,000 in ticket revenues.
Right.
It'd just be too diluted for him to do that, and that's one of the reasons that you see all these tours that are moving out till the first part of 21. It doesn't make sense to tour to such reduced capacities.
It's been interesting to see how different models are starting to emerge of trying to mitigate some of the economic impact. Clearly, a physical tour has sunk costs and hard costs that are somewhat invariable for a specific type of production. But you're seeing virtual shows draw massive audiences, like just a couple of weeks ago with the World Concert. There are weekly concerts that are drawing tens of millions of people. So a lot of these are free concerts at this point, but you can start to see an emerging behavioral model that could have some impact. How well tooled is your center to be able to host those things and without a live audience, be able to, or a reduced live audience, to be able to project those out to broader audiences that are non-TV sport audiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the demand is there. It's how you monetize those events, and I think people are doing it now to keep their brand alive and enhance their brands, and so that when they do come back out and are able to perform live, that the demand is waiting for them. But I think it's a temporary phenomenon. The virtual performances, you just can't match the live. I think it fills a little bit of the void. But is anybody going to pay $200 to watch a virtual concert? I don't think so. It's really just, I think, a lot of these are fundraisers, benefits for first line responders and medical professionals dealing with this, as they should be. But it also keeps the brand alive, and I think the performers are keeping themselves relevant by doing so, and good for them.
You made a comment, and it occurs to me that you think about you mentioned the first line responders. You guys, I think, helped set a standard of expectation when you announced you were paying your employees and your part-time employees through the season. How important is it to you and to the center that you take a leadership role in solving and rethinking and reinventing what's next?
Well, it's just an opportunity we have to set a standard. And we volunteered to be a COVID testing site, where a lot of venues might have been afraid of that and nervous about what that might bring. But we opened our doors, and we've been testing up to 500 people per day through a public testing opportunity that we have established with the city of Dallas and Dallas County. We just have the platform and we have the facility, and people trust us. They trust coming here. They know where we are. We're accessible by public transportation. So we want to stay engaged. We want to stay active and make a difference best we can. So that's one of our outreach projects we're participating in. We're also participating in blood drives and pet adoptions. We mentioned we're paying our employees, and you know, it's nobody's fault that this happened. So, you know, try and do as much good as you can from it, and don't punish people because it happened. It's not our employees' fault. It's not the concession worker or the housekeeper or the ticket taker's fault that this happened. Let's ride this out together, and that's been the commitment of our ownership group since day one.
That's fantastic. So let's fast forward a little bit, the next 18 to 24 months, or let's call it 6 to 18 months, optimistically. You're already planning. Your cycles of planning must go, I'm imagining, in kind of capital improvements on a 3 to 5 year timeline. So you've got a vision of where you were taking the arena and the center before this. You know, how is that changing? Obviously, it's changing in a big way. And then, you know, what do you see as the next 6 to 18 months for you?
I think the near term. Well, let me just say we were on the doorstep of a major $200 million renovation project. American Airlines Center will be 20 years old next year in July of 21. That is typically the end of life for your initial investment in a major arena. A lot has to be redone, reinvented, replaced. Technologies need to be updated. So we had about a $200 million renovation project that we were about to embark on, but that has been put off by several years now. We have to figure out how to just get back to doing business the way we were doing it before, and then we can set our sights on the grander plans and what our long-term 10, 15, 20-year future looks like. But we just have to get people back in the door. We have to have them be comfortable being here. We need them to spend money. That's going to be a challenge. We are, we're not a basic necessity. Entertainment, sports. We know it's vital to people's, social and entertainment needs, but it's not a basic necessity. So if people are challenged with the economics of this crisis, then that's something else we have to overcome. But we just need them to be comfortable coming back and feeling safe to do so.
That sounds, it sounds about right. I think that you as an essential service is probably increasing daily in that assessment of wanting to come back as part of the fabric of the community. Right? There are a lot of Mavericks fans out there that are chomping at the bit, I imagine. Well, thank you so much for your time today. The one thing I will ask is you said some really lovely things about everyone taking care of one another. And I wondered if you could just close with an example that you may have seen from some of your teams or players or something that you haven't done that is just sticks in your mind as an example of this is how we actually step up and do the right thing. Well,
Everybody wants to help. Players want to help. In particular, we had a challenge in funding. The paying our employees. It was a great deal of money to do so, and the players from both teams, the Mavericks and the Stars, many of them wrote checks. They don't even want people to know this, that they wrote checks to make this happen. And then they found out we were hosting the testing here at the American Airlines Center. So one of the players from the Mavericks, Dwight Powell, asked if he could feed the staff, and has been funding their dinner and lunch here at the American Airlines Center. And everybody's stepping up in big ways and small ways. I wish I had more examples, but it has been a gratifying experience to be part of the response in our community, and trying to make this a little easier on everybody.
Thank you for that. I didn't mean to put you so on the spot there, but it's a beautiful story. Dave, we have a couple of questions potentially from the audience, if you wouldn't mind. Great. Paulina, do you have those?
So we can see them here, down here, just. Okay, I think that, well, just one very interesting question. I think it's, what has been your biggest challenge at this moment?
Managing the emotions. You can imagine it's you go from a state of shock to disbelief to despair to hope back to despair. I mean, it's an emotional ride. To balance the emotional part and to be a leader that doesn't appear to be emotional sometimes is a challenge. And to it's my responsibility is to my team and to make them feel like whether I'm in control or not, that they think I am, and that we'll get through this together, and give them the confidence to stay positive and stay focused. And our focus is on how do we rebuild our business, which we'll start soon. We're going to open our offices in 2 weeks. Get people back in on staggered shifts, a few hours at a time, a couple days a week. But we have to get back to business of rebuilding our business. And we really don't know what that looks like at this point, what the timing is, but we'll get there and get that process started soon.
Sure.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much, Dave, for the answer. It's great. Very inspiring. Many people from the entertainment industry connected now from Mexico. What would you say to them? Something that you think is also could be applied to Mexico? I mean, same circumstances, but we're seeing what's happening now in the US, and it's something we're moving in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Right. Yeah, it seems like it may have affected you a little bit later than it's affected us. It just, and when I say we're in this together, it's the whole world. It's not just, Texas and Dallas and the United States. It's everybody that's my advice is we have to be patient, and we can't control this. We're used to all being in control and be able to fix things and deal with issues. But this one is we're not in charge of this, and we have to react accordingly, I guess. And that is to be patient, be as educated on the subject as we can, and be ready to react. And when we have the opportunity, and we know we know the answers to the challenges, which we don't know right now. Just be patient and try and be safe. Keep your people safe, and this will sort itself out. It's just going to take some time.
One last question. will there be a slowdown in new arenas, and what will happen with those just finished? Like Las Vegas Stadium, how will they reshape their business?
Again, going back to your title of this session is the great pause. We're paused. And venues like the stadium in Las Vegas, we had a new baseball park here in Arlington that was supposed to open for a large concert. I think it was on March 15th, and the state pretty much shut down on March 14th. So that venue has not opened. The Texas Rangers ballpark still is not open. And you just have to circle the wagons and try and weather the storm. It's going to be an economic disaster for our venues. And we just have to, but the venues aren't going away. And the sports aren't going away. We have to adjust our economic models accordingly and get through it. We're not eligible for federal aid. The size of our companies and venues and the owners that own these venues will not get assistance from the government. So, and that's probably particular challenge to the entertainment industry, which is going to be the last back online. And whether that's fair or not is another discussion. But we're optimistic that not only the newer venues, but our older venues like ours will just be able to adjust the economic models, and it'll take time. I don't think we'll be back to normal for 2 to 3 years.
Okay, well, David, it's a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for your time, for your insights.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and best of luck. We're going to remain optimistic as well. Thanks for all your great insight today.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.